Hi, everybody. For those of you who are just joining us, could we ask you to go to the audio options box on the left of your screen and select Listen Only? And then if you have questions, we'd like to ask you to use the chat box immediately below that. And we'll get started in a few more minutes. And I think we'll get started in just about another minute. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Linguistic Society of America's webinar on linguistic entrepreneurship. This is David Robinson. I'm the Director of Membership and Meetings for the LSA. We're glad you could join us this afternoon, and before we get started, I'd just like to take care of a few technical points. First, because there are so many of you, we'd like to keep the room quiet and ask you to, at the audio options box on the left of your screen, select Listen Only. And there certainly will be time for questions. And if you could type your questions in the chat box at the bottom left of the screen, that would be great. And second, I'd like to make sure that the screen sharing function is working well. So if you're seeing a brief PowerPoint presentation about the LSA and the webinar, if you could just type a couple of words in the chat box, just so that we know that it's working. Okay, it looks like it's working. Thank you, everybody. Great. So I would like to turn the floor over now to Anastasia Nyland. She is one of the conveners of the Linguistics Beyond Academia Special Interest Group, which is sponsoring this webinar, and she'll provide a few words of introduction.
Hi. Thank you very much, David. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I guess you can't reply. Great. Thank you all for joining us today. It was a great pleasure to see so many of you signing up and showing how much interest there is in this topic. It's very encouraging for the group. I just wanted to introduce the Linguistics Beyond Academia Special Interest Group, which is a group that we founded with the Linguistic Society of America in 2015. Our mission is to promote diverse professional applications of linguistics and also to facilitate understanding and appreciation of the various professional paths that linguists take after their training that go beyond the traditional faculty roles. An interest amongst linguists in taking their linguistics training with them into successful careers across lots and lots of different industries has never been higher, as I'm sure you've noticed. So our mission is to create a space for professional development and for exchange within our professional organization, which is the Linguistic Society of America. The SIG is open to all members of the LSA. You'll see on the little PowerPoint that's playing right now options for joining the LSA. This is for everyone who has an interest in learning more about professional paths. It is also for professional linguists who want to share their expertise and to network with other linguists who are working across professional fields beyond the academy. And we're really pleased that our members include linguists at all levels of training, so undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, professionals, faculty, academic administrators, and anybody else who has an interest in these topics. So please spread the word in your networks, your graduate student groups, your undergraduate student groups amongst your advisees, and so on. What do we do? This webinar is a good example of something that we have been very excited to start working about, which is bringing this awareness to people who aren't able to join us at in-person events. But other things that we have done is we have organized several events at past LSA annual meetings and at the Chicago Institute last year. This includes both short and longer workshops.
Okay. We're going to ask all of the participants to please mute their microphones. You have to go into the listen-only mode of the audio options. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the left, above the list of participants. Okay, thanks. So we do these types of events on professional development topics. Past topics have included resume building, telling your professional story, and just getting more information about the different fields that people go into. We also, and this is very important, work with members of the special interest group who want to organize local in-person events in their own communities. So if you have a great idea for a meetup or a workshop or a panel discussion in your area, please reach out to me and my colleague Anna Marie Trester about it. This webinar is the first of many, we hope, so please reach out to us if you have ideas for virtual events as well as in-person events. You can find our contact information on one of the slides that are going around right now at the bottom. This slide, read more about our, there we go. At the bottom of this slide that you're seeing currently, you can find our contact information if you want to reach out and talk more about this. I want to thank all the participants today for generously donating their time to educate us about the various interesting career paths that linguists take. So thank you all very much. And I will hand it over to Danielle.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'm just going to say one more time, because a couple of new people have come in, that you can mute your microphone using the listen-only option in the audio settings on the left side of the screen. So please do that if you're not a speaker. Thank you very much. All right, guys. So our presentation today is hopefully a way to show you that you can do some really interesting things with your linguistics degree, especially if you're willing to tap into your creativity and your entrepreneurial spirit. So first, I'm just going to introduce myself and the other speakers. So I'm Danielle Cosimo. I have a translation company here in Brazil where I live called Superior Translations, but more about me later. Our other speakers today, as you can see on this screen, are Laurel Sutton, co-founder of Catchword, a naming and branding company, Caroline Latterman, founder and CEO of Linguistics Consulting, which is a linguistics-based strategy firm. We have Barbara Clark, founder of You Say Tomato, a consultancy that helps fix communication problems. And we have Jennifer Wren, Senior Research Associate at the Center for Applied Linguistics, also known as CAL. Okay, I'd like to encourage you all to type in your questions in the chat box while each speaker is speaking. At the end of their presentations, they will take a few questions before moving on to the next speaker, and also we'll accept more questions at the end of all the presentations. Okay, and if you are currently a linguistics student trying to decide what to do with your life, I would encourage you to imagine yourselves as having the jobs or routines that the speakers are describing. See if it's something that would work for you. Okay? All right, so I'm going to start with my own presentation here. Let me just open this for you. Okay. Okay. So because I'm also moderating this event, I'm not able to see your questions until the end of my presentation, but I will check the chat box as soon as I turn off my PowerPoint. Okay, guys. So thank you very much, and please forgive me for my lack of PowerPoint skills. Okay. So again, my name is Danielle. My company is called Superior. The Portuguese name is Serviços de Tradução, because I live in Brazil, right? Okay, but this is my life as a full-time translator. Okay. A little bit of background here. I have a degree in linguistics from UC Berkeley, where I focused on Spanish linguistics as my second language, right? I started a master's program in applied linguistics and ESL, but it wasn't a good fit for me. I took a leave of absence, and soon after, I met my now husband, a Brazilian foreign exchange student. And in fact, he was a student at the English school where I was teaching. Scandalous. I moved down to Brazil to try out life with him, and the plan was to stay for 3 months, and that was 8 years ago. So I continued teaching here in Brazil for many years, but gradually phased into more translation work until both jobs became too demanding. I had to choose one, and so I chose translation. Because I was fluent in Spanish and had gotten my degree in linguistics, learning Portuguese in Brazil has felt like a never-ending field studies class. So a little more about my routine. Today I have my own translation company here in Brazil. I translate mostly medical and scientific research from Brazilians who want to get published abroad. But I got certified in translation from the American Translators Association. It's kind of a big deal. There are only 4 of us living in Brazil with this certification. So I also get a lot of requests to translate people's academic documents and documents for immigration, like transcripts and diplomas and IDs and things like that. So with this certification, I'm allowed to do translations in a legal capacity for universities and certain government agencies. Okay. My work uses very technical English, and I spend a lot of time reading papers from other researchers to have an idea of the terms and language they use, so that I make my clients' English article more consistent, right, with their field. Okay. I occasionally offer my services to other translation companies, but thankfully I have enough work from private clients that I don't need to do that very much. Okay. My schedule's a little different every day, but most of my working hours are spent in front of the computer in summer pajamas because Brazil is very hot. I almost never meet clients face-to-face. I also spend a lot of time doing tasks involved in owning my own company, like bureaucratic things and emails, of course, and taxes and marketing and networking and things like that. Okay. So some good sides to my career and my lifestyle. I essentially get paid to talk about and think about language all day. So I get paid to read and write, which is nice. I can live and work anywhere with a laptop and internet. So for example, it's a holiday weekend here in Brazil. And so right now I'm actually in this apartment hotel that I rented on the beach. That's nice too. But this flexibility has been helpful because my husband's career has required us to move a lot. So I've been able to maintain my own career. Okay. I spend a good part of my day reading. Yeah, I learn a lot of random, interesting things about so many topics that I translate. So, for instance, did you know that some species of shrimp are monogamous? Yeah. Okay. I don't have to dress up or really even get dressed for work. Okay. So there's a lot of good things. Okay. But there are some downsides. Okay. So it's hard to turn off the work mode part of my brain, especially because I'm solely responsible for the work and because I get emails from people in different time zones, right? The downside to choosing your own hours is staying focused and disciplined and not getting distracted or procrastinating, right? I have to know my field, but I also have to know how to deal with clients, and they can be frustrating. You know? If any of you are professors or have experience grading papers, you will know that Ph.D. students and scientists don't always have the best writing skills. So translating requires a delicate balance between respecting what the client wants to say, not changing their words too much, but also producing something that's coherent and correct in the second language. But as my husband says, you can have a boss or you can have clients, pick one. Okay. And I use linguistics every day with my job. There's a really snobby quote in the translation industry that goes something like, people who think they can work as a translator because they speak two languages is like people thinking they can play the piano because they have two hands. There are a lot of people who get into translation because of their bilingual backgrounds, but who aren't necessarily trained formally in either language or in bilingualism itself. So this is a problem when you have to argue your case technically for your translation choice, which comes up all the time. So my ability to be able to do that puts me ahead of the competition. Okay, but more importantly and more generally, the degree helps me understand relativity. Okay, it's kind of philosophical, but I have to go into my work knowing that my client's message is important and deserves to be expressed clearly and correctly in English, right? So I have to negotiate meaning and respect the client's wishes. Okay, some Brazilian linguists argue that Brazil has a case of diglossia, and I agree with them. For any Portuguese speakers listening, there's a little joke about the diglossia situation on the slide there. Okay? So just understanding that concept alone has saved me a lot of headache, Okay. And also, linguistics is one of the only language-related fields that actually performs research. So that puts me ahead of the competition in academic research translation. Because basically I learned how to read studies before I started working with studies. Okay. These concepts of logic and relativity can help people in any job, I think. I believe that the idea of being descriptive rather than prescriptive in the right moment can really help solve problems and help you respect other people in a conflict. In the same way that other languages aren't wrong or other linguistic choices aren't wrong if people understand them, other people are often not wrong if you think about the intent rather than the surface issues. Yeah, that's my philosophical idea of linguistics here. Okay. So if I had to give some advice to people interested in being entrepreneurs with their linguistics degree, I'd say find out what you can offer that no one else or a few others can. Okay, be prepared to pay your proverbial dues in whatever industry you start in. Take the time to get really good at something. And then once you're sure that you're good, don't be afraid to be confident about your abilities and your experience. Okay. That's it for my presentation. So thank you for listening. My website and my email address are here. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. No problem. Yes, there's a little joke for you if you like it with the linguistics llama. Okay, now I can see your questions here, so I have to just close this. Okay, let me pause the sharing. All right, let me see if anybody wrote any questions. What was involved in getting certified by the Translators Association? All right, so you have to be a member of the American Translators Association, and you have to have proof of translation experience, so they accept letters from bosses or from clients sometimes. They accept your taxes, your W-2s, if you had a job as translator or something related. Yes, thank you for sharing the website there. And then you have to pay for the test and take the test. And it's only about once a year that they offer it. And it's very specific to, you can only take it from one language to one other language. So I took Portuguese to English. So I'm not certified, for example, to do English to Portuguese. That would be a separate test. Okay? but yeah, it's definitely worth it. It's a bit of a pain in the beginning, but it's a good experience, and if you have translation experience, it's not difficult to take the test. Okay, some other questions here is how did I get my first client? Well, I was teaching English in Brazil, and some of my students asked me to translate their scientific articles. And I did, and they liked it and told their friends, and it just spread here in that way. There's a really important website called Pros for translators. Let me type it here in the chat box for you guys. And that's like almost like a Facebook for translators. And so you have your profile there, and clients can look for you, and other translation companies can look for you. On Pros, and I have a profile. I have to get the link. I'll post it in here for you guys. But on Pros, you can see examples of my work to the person asking about that. And someone asked if it's a lonely job, and it can be, yes, because I don't have coworkers. I have one assistant, but she works remotely, and so we only talk on the phone and on Skype and things like that. So in that aspect, yeah. But if you have a good social network, outside of your job, then it's, you have activities to keep you busy, and it's nice. And then you don't have to spend your whole day working, so that's good. Okay, and competitive, I would say that there are a lot of translators, that people who, like the joke that I made about the piano, there are a lot of people who offer themselves as translators, but who aren't necessarily qualified. So with your linguistics degree, I think you really will have more to offer if you're interested in the field, because almost nobody that works in translation has any formal training. So that's something that will really help you stand out. Okay, thank you for your questions. I'll send the link here to my Pros. Oh, thank you very much for finding that. Thank you. Okay, so there's my profile if you guys want to see examples of my work too. Okay, this is some other questions for me. Thank you. Thank you, Casey. Okay, I'm going to transfer over my presentation here to Laurel Sutton for her presentation. Are you able to speak, Laurel? Can we hear you?
I am here. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, let me just turn on your presentation here, okay?
Okay. And while you're doing that, I just want to put in another plug for our Facebook group, which I put in a link to in the chat earlier. So if you are interested in what we're doing, we have the page at LSA, obviously, but we also have a Facebook group. But there's discussion, and we're hoping to really build a community there. So I will just get into this if we could go to the next page and tell you about what I do. So I have, well, here's my background very quickly. I have degrees in English and linguistics that I got from Douglas College in 1985. I then came to UC Berkeley to do my master's degree, and I was kind of split between sociolinguistics and phonetics. And at the end of my time in graduate school, before I had gotten my Ph.D., I took a job in naming at a naming company that was located in Berkeley. And I loved it, and my colleagues loved it as well. So we decided to start our own naming company, which we did in 1998, and that's when we founded Catchword. And somebody needs to mute their microphone because there's a lot of noise happening. What we do at Catchword is we create names. We do product names and company names and service names, and we've worked with clients in the United States, but in fact in the rest of the world. Here's a quick listing of some of the clients that we've had over the years. Some of the names we do are strictly business to business, so you might never actually see them, but some of them are consumer facing. So for Starbucks, we did the name Refreshers for the drinks, the juice drinks that you can get in the stores and in cans. For Fitbit, we've named just about all of the products that they have, the fitness monitors that you wear on your arm. We did the alphanumeric naming for some of the BlackBerry products that they sell, and then just lots and lots of other product service company names. And over the years since we started, we've done, I think, literally hundreds and hundreds of projects. It's been very, very busy. If we could go to the next one. So during the day, I do a lot of different things. We're a very small company. There's only 5 of us all together. And as one of the partners, I have responsibility for running the company as well as actually doing the project work. A lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis are things that Danielle was just talking about. So I have to find clients. I have to respond to inquiries. I hire and manage and fire employees. I do blogging for our website. I do speaking engagements. People want to hear about what we do and about trademarks. And then we have an office, so there's just stuff in the office that has to get done, like cleaning the microwave and watering the plants and filing, things like that. Someone has to do it, and we all need to take turns. In terms of project direction, I don't do a lot of the name creation itself, although I do some of it. Mostly what I do is manage a project with a client. So I will talk with them on the phone, I'll meet with them in person, I will pick the people in my company who will work with that client on the project, who's going to do the creative work. I write the briefs that we need to do for each project. I help select the names out of the long list of creative work that my team generates. I do some trademark research on names to make sure that they're available. And I also present work. So I'll put together a PowerPoint deck and we'll meet with the client either on the phone or in person to walk them through the names that we've created for them and explain why they're good names. That part of it is really where my linguistic training has been invaluable, because I can take a list of names, maybe 30 names, and I can talk about those names just off the cuff for half an hour and explain where each one of them came from, what they might mean in terms of, sound symbolism, why they fit with the company and their brand. And it's very easy for me. It's kind of like being in a classroom, and I had teaching experience at Berkeley. So that part is wonderful, and I love it. But I also am very sensitive to the communications with our clients in my writing, in the work that I do on the telephone. Linguistics has informed all of that, so it's been great. And there aren't many linguists in the field of naming, surprisingly. There are a lot of English majors, there's a lot of business majors. Both my partners are MBAs, so they were really good at coming up with business plans and managing the finances, about which I knew nothing. So it's really been a good partnership between my linguistic background and the business skills that my partners had. It's pretty competitive. There are a lot of naming companies out there. Some are big, some are small. The smaller companies tend to be more specialized, like we are, that just do naming. But there are some very large companies, like Landor is one of them. They're an international brand identity firm, so they do logos, and they do naming, and they do writing, and they do PR, and a lot of other stuff in addition to just the naming component. And I've met a number of people through doing this and just through my career who are linguists who have gone on to careers in naming, so it's been really interesting to see more linguists entering the field.
Yes. I'm just going to mention to everybody, if you are a participant, to please mute your microphone going into the audio options and choosing listen only, because we can hear a lot of background noise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next slide.
So that's what I do. That's where my career's gone, and that's what I'll probably be doing for a while. I feel very, very lucky to have found a career where I actually get to use my degree every single day, just about in everything that I do, and that's been fantastic. So I will address some of the questions. Yeah, onomastics, it's very very related because it's about names, and in fact I've published a couple of papers in some different onomastic journals. There's an organization here in the United States called the American Name Society, and they have their meeting in conjunction with LSA every year. A member of the Name Society, I've given papers, and they're really good. So if you're interested in onomastics and in naming in general, they're a really good organization to look at. They're small. They put out a journal. It's a peer-reviewed journal that comes out 4 times a year. And the conferences are really interesting because you get topics on things like brand names, but also historical names, personal names, names in just about every aspect of life that you can imagine. The story of how I got into naming, to answer this question, was almost by accident. I was in graduate school and I needed a job. I had a friend who was working at a naming company who's also a linguist, and she said, I think you'd be a really good fit for this. Why don't you come over and do an interview? And I did, and they liked me, and I got hired. I didn't even know that naming was a career that you could have before my friend introduced me to the concept. So it wasn't like I set out to do it, but I think more people now are looking for careers in naming. So question, what kind of linguists are you using creating and choosing names? It's a lot of different things. Some of it is phonetics, so specifically, is it pronounceable? Does it sound pleasing to the ear? Sometimes we have clients who specifically want a name that's going to work really well in Asia, so we need to be very sensitive to things like clusters of consonants in the names. We don't want those. We try to go for a much simpler construction, consonant vowel, which is just easier worldwide anyway. But I also use historical linguistics when I'm talking about the etymology of words or names, where we took the inspiration for a name from. And also a lot of sociolinguistics, because clients want the names to appeal to a certain audience. So if it's skewing towards women, you need to be sensitive to word parts or meanings that might be more appropriate for women than for men, and whatever group that they want to appeal to. So I draw on a lot of different things in creating and choosing those names, and I found it's been really helpful. And also, clients are hugely impressed when you pull out the linguistics to tell them that there's actually some science behind what you do and why you do it. Okay, I think those were all the questions for me, so unless anybody has any other questions, we can move along to Caroline Latterman, who's our next presenter.
Thanks, Laurel. So hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Latterman. I'm the founder and CEO of Linguistic Consulting. My office is located in Manhattan, although I work with clients here in the city. I work with clients domestically and then internationally as well using WebEx. I also work from my home office, so some days I'm taking the train into the city, and then other days I can stay in my home and go to the gym more easily, go to Starbucks for lunchtime. So there's a lot of flexibility in my schedule that way. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a brief overview of my academic background here. So my bachelor's was almost a double major. It was called Linguistics and Languages. So it was a full linguistics major plus kind of 2/3 of a French and Spanish major. So I'm fluent in French. My Spanish is good enough. I speak a fair amount of Haitian Creole, and then I can, as most linguists, read and do other things with a few other languages. My master's is in Intercultural Communication. It's technically a master's of education. It's changed. It's at Penn. It's changed since I was there. It really then was to kind of build your own. So for me, it was about a third education, a third intercultural, and then kind of intercultural/linguistics woven in there. And then my Ph.D. is in linguistics. I did a variety of different areas, as most people do. I specialized in sociolinguistics and psycholinguistics. And then for my dissertation, I actually kind of merged the two in a way that isn't usually done. So that was really cool to be able to kind of combine different areas, different research modalities, and ways of thinking. So next slide, please. I'll tell you a little bit about my typical tasks and routine, kind of what I do. Excuse me. Each day is very different. There are literally no 2 days that are the same. There are some basic things that I do a little bit of almost every day, which includes teaching clients, whether it's private clients in my office, private or corporate clients over WebEx, or going to a corporate client site to teach one of their employees or 10 of their employees, either individually or groups. So that really varies. And then some of my clients who are even here in Manhattan will take part of their lessons online over WebEx and then part in the office, depending on what their schedule is like. They travel a lot. I work with high-level executives, and so they have crazy schedules. I have a busy schedule, so there's a lot of kind of negotiation there with our time. I do a lot of creating. I specifically set apart or set aside thinking time every day. I'm very busy. Some weeks are busier than others. Some weeks I feel like I'm kind of surviving. I can barely keep up with everything. Other weeks are easier. But I really like to set aside time for thinking, to think about my business, to think about where I want it to go, to think about, what's going well, what's going less well, what can I do, how can I change things up, what else can I offer, how can I expand on a program I already have. So I think that's really important, to make sure that you make time for that. I do a lot of reading. I read academic texts. Those are among my favorites. I read business magazines. I read Entrepreneur, Inc., Fast Company. Some of those magazines have conferences, which I find to be interesting. And then I also will often read texts that are around the industries that my clients are working in. So I tend to get a lot of technology clients. I had one CEO who was the founder of a mobile app that's actually just gotten acquired, which was really exciting. So I would read some things about that to kind of streamline the lessons. All the lessons I do are very, very personalized. I realize I haven't told you what I do yet. So I do a lot of things. My main focus right now is accent neutralization. I like to call it accent addition because the standard terms are accent neutralization, accent reduction. It's not a subtractive process, so it's really an additive process. They're adding on this American accent. And the reason that I do this work, at first I kind of actually felt like maybe I was a sellout, that I was like going against the academic principles of not changing who we are. But the reality is that a lot of international speakers hit kind of a linguistic glass ceiling, and they can't move up in their company. They're getting stuck. They're not getting promotions or raises because of their accent. It's holding them back. And aside from business reasons, they get frustrated. They go to Starbucks and they order their coffee, and the barista doesn't know how to write their name, and there are awkward moments and there are frustrating moments, and they hate being asked where they're from all the time. So there's a lot of business reasons for them to do this, and then there's also a lot of personal reasons. It gives them more confidence. They're less frustrated, and there are fewer awkward moments. They, have all of these stories about the awkward moments when someone misunderstood them, or they weren't sure if someone understood and there was a weird, reaction. So there's a lot that goes into that. Sales and marketing are also a big part of what I do. I do have an intern right now, but I don't have a sales and marketing team at this point. I'm not big enough yet. So I spend a lot of time meeting prospective clients. I go to networking events. I have drinks with current clients, to kind of keep things going. There's a lot that goes into that, and as I'll say a bit more later, you don't have to enjoy it, but you at least have to be willing to do it to have your own business. Because unless you somehow start out and you just make it big really quickly, you're going to have to do the sales and marketing on your own, and that's an area that I find that a lot of people in academia really shy away from. So you have to just kind of make yourself do that in order to really get your company moving. I also do presentation skills, interviewing skills, how to make American friends. I had a client who was going to a garden party. So we had part of his lessons on how do you dress for a garden party in Alabama. So there were slides with a polo shirt and flat front khaki pants, and so I really customize everything that I do. Next slide, please. There are a lot of pros and cons to entrepreneurship. I personally find there are a lot more pros than cons, but they do exist. So some of the pros here are that there's really an extremely wide variety of subjects that I teach, and then I interweave. I really interweave my education background, which is my teaching. What I'm really doing every day is teaching, essentially. I weave in the linguistics, the sociolinguistics, how do you get what you want? If you're a woman, let's make sure that you're not using upspeak. There's a lot that goes into that. Psycholinguistics, how are we processing language? When you're giving a presentation, for example, how can we make sure that your sentence structure is in a way that really is easy to listen to and easy to process versus how a lot of people, or at least a lot of my clients, will tend to literally write out their presentation in words, and then it's more of a written style, which is harder to process auditorily. I have very high client satisfaction, and that's a big pro because I'm really good at what I do and I really like it, and also kind of piggybacking off of what Danielle said, don't be modest. I literally say to clients, I'm very good at what I do. Here's what you're going to get. Here's why you should work with me. And they don't take it as arrogance. They take it as like, oh, okay, she's confident. She has this business. They believe me. They believe me and they trust me. I really like that I create my own methodology, my own systems. I really like doing the things the way that I want to do them. I really like creating my own schedule. My schedule certainly does revolve around my clients, so it's not 100% up to me. But if I don't want to have a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, I don't have to. I can say no, 10 o'clock is the earliest that I offer. So there's a lot of flexibility with that. And I really, really love what I do every single day. I can talk about this for hours. I love linguistics, as I'm sure you do. And I don't wake up thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to go to my job. Oh my gosh. I love what I do. I look forward to every day, and every day, like I said, really is very different from the other. I also really love living in New York. I like that I can live where I want to live, and then I found a niche that makes a lot of sense here with the number of international professionals that we have here. So some cons here. I feel like people don't talk about money, but I think money is something that's really important to talk about when you're talking about creating your own business here. So you do usually need some sort of startup money. You might not need it depending on kind of your location. Danielle, for example, like she mentioned that she works out of her home, so I expect that she needed less. For me, I needed to have an office with a door in the city. And there are a lot of cubicles in the city that go for a reasonable amount. But to get an office in a good area of town that you could present to your clients and that has a door so that you can do what you're going to do is really hard. So I needed money for that, but I needed the clients to have the money, but I couldn't have the clients until I had the office. So it was this, circular problem. So you need some money to get started there. You have to, like I said, you have to do continuous sales and marketing, networking. Once you're big enough, if you really hate the sales, you can hire someone to do that for you. But it's something that has to be done. You're constantly, cultivating clients. And then you do need to be able to manage your time and your projects independently. So you need to, you're not going to have deadlines like you do in school and a professor to make you feel bad if you miss your deadline. You're not asking for extensions like you might in school. You have to really make sure that you're on top of it and that you're getting things done in a timely manner. And I'd like to give a little piece of advice here also about procrastination. I read that somewhere, and I find it to be very true. I read that we tend to procrastinate, and I procrastinate too sometimes, but we tend to procrastinate because we're scared of something. And so what I do now is when I find myself procrastinating, if I'm calling like a huge potential client, or I'm making some sort of phone call or something I need to do that I'm kind of putting off and I realize I'm putting it off, I literally say to myself, what am I scared of? And then once I can identify what I'm scared of, it makes it much easier to just do whatever it is that needs to get done, and make that work out. Next slide, please. So my linguistics degree, especially having a Ph.D., helps tremendously. It gives me an enormous amount of credibility. Once people hear Dr. Caroline Latterman, they're much more willing to pick up the phone and have a conversation with me. They say, oh, what do you do? It kind of tends to lead them to believe, oh, she has a Ph.D., she has the highest degree in the field, she must be right, she must know what she's talking about. So then that, plus me saying to them, I'm really good at what I do, I have great success with clients, combined to make a lot of credibility, which I think helps me a lot. And then, I interweave linguistics, culture, social psychology, psycholinguistics, really into everything I do. I thought when I started that I could only teach what I learned in academia, and then I realized, they don't care where I learned what I know, they just want to learn it. So I realized, I'm pretty good at life. I know how to handle these different social situations. I'm good at networking. I'm good at presentation skills often. I'm good at meeting people. And so I just teach them how to do that. And it's not something I learned in school, but it was kind of a big aha moment when I realized, like, oh, I can teach them life skills that I have. I don't have to have been taught it in a very formalized way. Last slide here, some advice. I strongly advise you to do what you love to do. Don't create a job because you think it's going to make a lot of money. Do find a job that will make you money, but make sure it's something that you love to do. Find a pain point that clients are already aware of. I didn't really get this at the beginning. You already have to educate them about what linguistics is, the science of language. They know that there are conversation skills, conversation classes, ESL classes, grammar classes. Everyone knows that, but people don't really know what linguistics is. And so you're going to have to educate them about what you can do. If you're also having to educate them about what their pain points are, that's just a lot harder. So find a pain point that your client or your base has, and then educate them about what you do and how you can help. But it's a lot easier if they know the pain point already. You have to be willing to take a lot of risks. You're going to have to put yourself out there in uncomfortable situations. You're going to have to trust yourself. You're going to have to make some really big decisions, not always having as much information as you'd like. You have to be really willing to do that. And then again, back to the money. Make sure you have a financial plan. Make sure that you're not going to make boatloads of money usually right away. So make sure that you have some money to start with so that while you're building the business, you have money to live on. Because a lot of companies fold because they don't have a plan and they don't have ample money to get started with there. So let me scroll up here and answer some questions. Let's see. Disadvantages of upspeak. So did I read that right? Yeah, so disadvantage of upspeak generally, when we talk like this and we go up, women tend to do this more than men, is that we lose our credibility. We don't sound as intelligent, or people don't perceive us as intelligent. Usually we don't sound as in control of ourselves and of what we're saying. We sound less powerful. So I do work a lot with clients to make sure that the end of the sentence their voice goes down, especially if they're speaking in a group or in a presentation arena, really making sure that they sound as powerful as they can, not only in what they're saying and how they're saying, but in what it actually sounds like. I don't bill by the hour. I bill by the project. I offer different programs. I get some of my clients through Google AdWords. When I first started out, I got my clients all through Craigslist. There's you can post for services on Craigslist, and that's how I got them. I charge way too much now for Craigslist, the Craigslist audience, if you will. So I don't use that anymore. Google AdWords actually works really well for me. So that's one of the ways that I get clients. Thank you. Yes, I'm very passionate about what I do. So how did I get the money to start the business? That was just a leap. I basically said, I'm good at what I do. I have experience. I've done this some through grad school. I've done this some through both grad school, my Ph.D. and my master's. So I had some clients that I was teaching over WebEx, so I had some money coming in. I could do that from my apartment. And then I just took the leap. I got the cheapest office I could find and, built it up that way. I'm going to stop answering questions here so I don't go too far over my time. But at the end, we'll have more time for questions to answer, and hopefully I can circle back to some of those that you have there. So thank you. And I'm now going to turn this over to Barbara Clark for her participation. And thank you for your patience while we switch over the PowerPoint deck here.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Hi, everyone. And namaste to everyone who speaks Hindi. I'm learning Hindi, so aap log kaise hain? Hopefully that was pronounced correctly. Anyway, so I'm Barbara Clark, and hello from sunny, cloudy, spring-like Kent in the UK, where I'm now based. So I'm founder of You Say Tomato or Tomato, which is a consultancy that helps fix communication problems. That's eventually what I've settled on for now, how I can kind of market myself. I do lots more than that, but I've learned to kind of keep it brief and then let people, let that sink in and then kind of let them ask questions, and I can talk a lot more about it. I specialize in safety critical industries, including aviation, and I've now just started to work with private security, which is fascinating. So could I just have the next slide? I only have one slide, so not much switching about. So I was born in Detroit, and I did my bachelor's degree in anthropology at Wayne State in Detroit, intending to go into law, which in the U.S. is a postgraduate degree. Sorry, not an undergraduate degree. So for various reasons, I didn't. I took a year out. I worked full-time and went to school full-time during my bachelor's degree. So it was quite intense. So I took a year, and that year turned into many years away from academia, during which time I did various things like worked in a Greek Orthodox church, and I managed a coffee shop. And then I became a flight attendant or cabin crew for 10 years or so for a U.S. air carrier, which I loved. But then I became a bit of a misanthrope, and various other reasons I decided to leave the job and the U.S., and I did a Ph.D., first a master's degree and then a Ph.D. in linguistics at Queen Mary in London. I always knew that I was going to not be a full-time academic for also various reasons, which I'm happy to go into the questions. I just am mindful of time. So I did my Ph.D. because having worked in aviation as cabin crew for 10 years, I knew that there was a need for qualitative linguistic anthropology research and consultancy. And my other half is a consultant, and so he helped me kind of steer my thinking towards consultancy. And when I was doing my Ph.D., I knew what I was going to do, so I started to make connections and relationships with prospective clients, people I wanted to work with, and organizations I wanted to work with. And that's a major source of advice that I would advise anyone thinking of doing consultancy, is start building relationships early, because what you don't want to do is finish your Ph.D. or finish whatever you want to do, or decide you go into consultancy or start your own business, and then you have no relationships and you're kind of starting from ground zero. So put the building blocks into place while you still have time. So I founded You Say Tomato. I'll stick with that pronunciation because American English is my native accent. So I founded You Say Tomato in September of 2012, which is about a month after submitting my thesis, which is a PhD. In the UK, it's called a thesis. So a tiny blurb: we help solve communication problems. We specialize in reducing miscommunication in safety-critical industries and professions. And we provide consultancy in strategy and training services, including train-the-trainer stuff. As far as typical tasks or routine, like many other of my esteemed colleagues who spoke before me, there's no real typical day for me, but a great deal of my time includes emailing, lots of emailing. I constantly feel like I'm being buried under a mound of email, and so I try to catch up on it when I don't need a lot of brain power, if that makes sense. So like when I'm waking up and like after dinner, I guess. And the emailing is like clients, leads, contacts, things like that. I'm also quite active on Twitter, which I started using during my PhD as a kind of way to relieve the stress of doing a PhD. And I've met a lot of friends, and also I turned it into a way to sort of network. And so now I use it also as a source of income because I do a Twitter course for professionals, which was an extension of my PhD, how professionals, C-suite people, things like that, can use Twitter to promote and construct a professional identity that's sort of in keeping with their physical professional identity and career. Also, I do a lot of networking via meetups and conferences and other social and professional events, like Carolyn, to kind of get the word out there about what I do and explain what I do. Because I found for me, networking and face-to-face interaction, I think, is the best way to talk about what I do. Because there aren't a lot of people doing what I do in the unique way that I do. So it kind of helps so that people see me, know me, get to understand that I know what I'm talking about, and we can talk about the advantages of how my business and service can help them. I'm also constantly learning, acquiring knowledge about, particularly about the business side, because I really didn't and still don't know much about business, PR, and marketing. So I always want to learn about selling, marketing, business. Also, because I specialize in aviation, I go to aviation conferences. I've just come from a human factors conference, which was the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. Absolutely fascinating. It could use a lot of linguists, so it might be an area for some of you to explore if you're interested. I try to exercise. My days also involve a lot of snoozes and a lot of coffee. I do a lot of writing. I'm trying to be a lot more active on my website, You Say Tomato, with blog posts. I also do, as part of my consultancy, deliverables, reports, and articles. Particularly, I'm trying to get more industry articles out to kind of take away from the academic work. Not take away, but translate the academic work to industry and professional speak, if that makes sense. I've just had an article published in Pragmatics and Society, so I've been asked to pare that down to about a 1,200-word article for an aviation website. I also do a lot of mentoring, prospective and current postgraduate or graduate students. If you're thinking of doing a PhD or a master's degree in linguistics, but you're thinking about being a consultant or not going into academia. Also, if you're interested in aviation stuff, and my contact details are on the screen, so please feel free to contact me, email or Twitter, if you have any more questions, because when I was going through my PhD, I had quite a difficult time, and so many people were so generous with their time and advice and shoulder to cry on. So I feel like, well, I definitely want to pay it forward. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Quick, like some pros and cons about my career and lifestyle. Like other people, a massive pro is I get to work mainly from home. So I have very flexible hours, and I don't really have a dress code. I get to choose my own clients and projects, which is really exciting because that means I always get to do what I love, or at least research what I love. I get to work with and learn from loads of really brilliant and intelligent and clever people, and I get to increase my knowledge base about a lot of professions and practices, which, as a result, increases my marketability as a consultant. And I also get to choose what conferences I present at and where I can go, what to attend, things like that. There are quite a few downsides. I'll only touch on a few of them, not to turn anyone away from entrepreneurship. But in addition to a lot of the money stuff, which is a huge thing, there was a big transition from academic to consultant and learning consultancy and business language and jargon. I'm still learning it. So how to translate academic theories and ideas into what your business clients will care about and what will be relevant for them is a huge thing. And I found that during my PhD, my university assumed that I was going to go into academia, so there wasn't a lot of support for my career plans. at least that I was aware of. So another con is learning selling and marketing and promotion of both myself and my consultancy. And I might need to have a chat with Caroline about Google AdWords, because I had a look at it and I thought, oh God, this is a nightmare to learn. So, but it looks like a really important avenue for PR and marketing, so I do want to have a look at that. Being diligent about blog posts is a big thing for me, and quite frankly, overall time management. And I think that that's a kind of industry-wide. I think that's, regardless of what you go into, time management is a crucial skill to learn. And just quite briefly, my linguistics degree has helped me in quite a few ways. It's given me credibility in some professional and business contexts, but also I have to say that my experience in the industry has given me sometimes more credibility, because sometimes when people hear that you have a Ph.D., with some people it can give credibility, but other people can think, oh God, you're just an ivory tower academic, how are you going to help me? So depending on your client or your audience, it might be quite good to play up your experience with working in, getting your hands dirty at the coal face, as they say in British English. Linguistics degree, my PhD, and my master's degree as well have provided theoretical underpinnings for data collection and analysis, various methodologies, and theories for looking at identity and community, which are two big areas of my consultancy. It's given me confidence, because sometimes I think if I've passed my Viva, I can do anything, and nothing is that difficult for me, quite frankly, because the Viva was the most difficult thing for me. And it also taught me how to do a literature review, data collection, research design, and various practical things like that. So that's the end of what I had to say. So let's, forgive me, I have really rubbish vision, so I'll have to squint at these questions. Oh, hi Laura, nice to be in Detroit. Let's see, what's unique about what I do? What's unique about what I do is that I have both industry experience, excuse me, so working on the line, having actually experienced miscommunication in a safety-critical context. So I understand the stresses that can come, practically speaking, and then I also give a sort of objective academic, sorry, I just had to cough there. I also give an academic perspective, so when people are questioning things, I can say, well, look, it's grounded in research that's been kind of proved and argued over time. Let's see, any other questions? I'm afraid willing to create an online advanced seminar. Sure. Oh yes, I was at South by Southwest. I did a lot of marketing myself, meeting with people. I've got a blog post coming up with a link. I was interviewed at the museum, which Washington, D.C. had their own house. Lots of cities and countries have their own houses at South by Southwest. And I was invited to be interviewed, which is a huge honor. And they've sent a video link, so I'll put that up on my website at some point. I've also been working with a startup, and we set up lots of meetings and did lots of marketing for the startup as well. I'm happy to talk about South by Southwest as well. It was my first time going. So anyway, I think I've probably run over my time massively. So thank you very much for your questions. Please contact me if you have anything else. And now I'm going to turn over to Jennifer Wren.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Hi, so I'm Jennifer Wren. I am a senior research associate at the Center for Applied Linguistics, and I'm a little different than the other speakers. The other speakers all founded and own, or are part of their own businesses. I work for a nonprofit organization, so it's a little bit different, but I guess it's still outside the realm of a typical linguistics career. So I can talk about how I use my my skills as a linguist here at Cal. So next slide, please. And I apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so I have a very, very husky voice thing going on. So like many people, I think, although not the other speakers, I did not start out going into linguistics. I majored in government and economics as an undergraduate, and I thought about law school. I thought about lots of things. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I had taken a linguistics course, a couple actually, and I loved them. So upon figuring out, where I wanted to go when I went back to graduate school, I did end up then studying linguistics at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I did my master's and my Ph.D. there, and I focused, so it's a theoretical program, so I got a good theoretical grounding in linguistics, but I focused on sociolinguistics and language acquisition, and I worked with a professor, Walt Wolfram, at North Carolina State University. And throughout my graduate career, and then beyond actually, I worked at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at UNC Chapel Hill. I worked on a project, a longitudinal study of African American children. And I worked on that project for my master's and my PhD. And I then continued at FPG through an Institute of Education Sciences postdoc with a focus on early childhood education. So, even throughout graduate school and my postdoc, I was working in a very interdisciplinary kind of environment, which has set me up well for being where I am now. Next slide, please. So here at Cal, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what Cal does and what I do. So I am currently a senior research associate, and in that role, I don't even know how I would begin to describe a typical day. I work on a number of different projects. I work on them in various different capacities. So I will tell you a little bit what Cal does and then also give you examples of actual projects. I think that will actually give you a sense of the work I do better than trying to encapsulate a typical day. But the other role that I hold here, which is a role that I never ever would have guessed would have, is that I'm the Institutional Review Board Chair. I'm the IRB Chair at Cal. So I've been in that position for a little over a year and a half. Before that, I was on the board for about a year. And that has been really interesting because every single research study that comes through Cal passes over my desk. So I get a sense of not only what's going on at Cal, but different kinds of research studies and ways that research is done. So that's been a very interesting and unexpected role for me. Next slide. So just to give you an overview of what Cal does, we have several areas of impact, and we focus on things like English learners, world languages, testing and assessment, immigrant and refugee integration, language and culture and society, language policy and planning, and I've bolded the ones that I work on. So I do a lot of work with English learner populations. I work in the testing realm, and my background, as I said, is in sociolinguistics and language variation. So I'm reinvigorating the language and culture and society component of Cal. And we also are involved in a number of products and services. So we do things like do trainings for teachers. We help advise schools that want to, either start or modify their bilingual and dual language programs. We create early language assessment. So I feel like Cal is in this really interesting place where we are connected to academia, but also with people in the real world, right? Like with teachers and administrators and policymakers. So it's kind of that neat bridge that I think is so important. Next slide. And as I said, I've worked in a really interdisciplinary environment for a long time. So at Cal we have linguists, right? We have applied linguists and sociolinguists like me, language testers, language policy analysts, English as a foreign language and English as a second language educators. So there are a lot of former teachers here at Cal, professional development specialists that work with teachers, psychometricians, artists and designers, market researchers. So you hear the Center for Applied Linguistics and you think it's a building full of linguists, but really it's really not. It's really like a motley crew here, but which I think is actually a benefit. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about several of the projects. Like I said, what I do is so varied from day to day. I think it's just kind of easier to give examples.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask everybody to mute their microphones again, please, if you're just coming in. and you're a participant, can you please go into the audio settings and choose listen only? Thank you. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Thank you. So one of my main projects is I work on a project where we partner with the WIDA Consortium, which is a consortium of 38 states and territories in the U.S. And we are the test development house, I guess, for the Access for ELL test, which is a K-12 English language proficiency test. So, you know, we have a lot of people here at Cal that are actually making the test, writing items and all of that. And I don't do that. I don't write items. But what I do is I help on the research side to sort of dig into it, make sure that we're writing good items, make sure that the test is doing what we want, make sure that the responses we're getting are the kinds of things we want. So for example, I worked with a colleague, a psychometrician, to look at the efficacy of using ethnicity as a proxy for students' home language. So it's really hard to get reliable data on home language for lots of reasons. One, because it's not required by census and things like that. Another thing is you're dealing with people that don't speak English, and so getting that back can be hard. So a lot of times what people do is they do Hispanic, non-Hispanic. And especially because Spanish is, you know, the largest second, you know, other language in the United States after English, that, you know, seems like, okay, that might be a good proxy. So we wanted to dig into that, though, because what you're doing is, if you are doing, you know, Hispanic equals Spanish and non-Hispanic equals non-Spanish, I mean, we all know that that's not true, right? There are Hispanics that don't speak Spanish, and there are non-Hispanics that do, and you know, and in doing that, you're lumping someone who speaks a Germanic language in with someone that speaks something that's non-Indo-European. So anyway, so I analyzed items, and we analyzed data and found that there were differences. So I think that was an important, you know, consideration going forward, that we might want to be very careful about this when we're looking at our test items. I also worked with a couple of psychometricians to conduct an analysis to see whether items might be preference a certain language group. So we looked at items, we looked for word level features, sentence level features, and then cultural features to see if they might, for example, be about topics that would be not familiar to certain groups, or might use something like passive voice, which would, you know, might really trip up someone at a lower proficiency level, where that's not what you're trying to get at. So that was another another example on that project. Next slide, please. Also, as part of the WIDA projects, I've organized a sociolinguistic group. So we are working on a number of projects, but one of the things that we're doing is looking at how students use constructive dialogue. So these are grade 1 kids in a narrative speaking task. So we're finding that older students, or not older students, more proficient students, higher proficiency students, start bringing in these features that show a greater mastery of the language, and that would be like creating dialogues when they're retelling the story. And so that's a really helpful way to think about, you know, how we might want to elicit language from students, and also how we would then rate language from students. Especially because it's easy to tell if a student is low proficiency versus mid, but once you get into the higher levels, it's hard to tease apart whether they're good, really good, and ready, you know, for content to be at the same level as their English-speaking peers. That's been a really fun project. And I also worked on another project looking at handwritten and keyboarded writing samples. And so this, I really drew on a lot of my graduate work on African American English, created codes to look for patterns across handwritten and keyboarded writing samples from English language learners, used transcription software, which I also am very familiar with from graduate school, looked at error code linguistic features, things like text length, MLU, linguistic diversity, all of that. Next slide. And then another project that I'm working on with a colleague in the professional development realm is that we are a subcontractor with the University of the District of Columbia. They have a program to prepare aspiring science and math teachers for full-time licensure in middle school science in Washington. And so our work is to help create course modules to help them, to prepare them for working with the needs of students with diverse backgrounds. So that definitely includes English learners, but also students who speak non-standard varieties of English in the home. And so my colleague and I created narrated PowerPoints that professors could use to give backgrounds on academic and content-related language, and this is specifically in the context of science teaching. Next slide. And then a few other things. So I've worked on an IES proposal where the purpose was to identify instructional strategies that promote student skills in their first language while also acquiring proficiency in English, so that was a focus on dual language. I worked on a white paper for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on Language Learning. And so the purpose of that was to provide context and information on issues surrounding language learning to the commission, and that's something that then goes up to Congress, so that was really exciting. And then I'm also working with the other sociolinguist here at Cal on a practitioner brief on what teachers need to know about language variation. And like I said, I feel like Cal is in this really important space where we work with teachers, we work with students, we work with administrators, state education associations, and yet we also do have that connection to academia. So the purpose is to give guidance to teachers who work with students that speak non-standard varieties of English in a way that is relevant and connects with them. Next slide. So I just want to sum up with some pros and cons, and like everyone else said, of course, there's a mix. Pro is, for the most part, my day is pretty much 9 to 5. There's not an expectation that you're working nights and weekends and all the time like there is in academia, especially early in your career. And you don't have the sort of publish or perish fear. So there's an opportunity for a better work-life balance. That said, a lot of the work that I do, I write papers, I present at conferences, I write, briefs and things like that, and a lot of that does end up being on my own time. So even though sort of the day-to-day tasks, if you can call it that, are 9 to 5, I do, work nights and weekends working on that grant proposal, working on that journal article, that kind of thing. The other, and also because we don't have like the tenure clock, you really have to be self-motivated to get those publications out. So if you want to be publishing and presenting, you need to set up some ways to keep that happening because you're not going to be worried about your tenure review. The other thing, another big pro is, as I said, you get to work with a lot of people with different backgrounds. Working in a nonprofit, people are not in it for the money. Oh,
there's a big echo.
So, there's a big echo.
On their headphones. Somebody new who just came in, I think. Okay, I think it's fixed.
Okay.
Right, go ahead. No, it's not. Also, I'd like you guys to, if you're a participant, please go into the audio settings and choose listen only so that you turn off your speaker and microphone. Did we fix it? We got it.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, like I was saying, I work with a lot of people from different backgrounds, so I'm always learning new things and hearing different perspectives, and that is really exciting. Also at a nonprofit, people are not here because they want to get rich. So, I work with people that are really good, nice people that want to help. They want to be helping students or English learners or, refugees, and so that's wonderful. I mean, I work with good people all the time. But as I said, on the flip side of like the diversity of Cal, there aren't a lot of other sociolinguists, so sometimes it's a little lonely in that respect. But I'm trying to build that, and there's room for that, which is exciting. And I do adjunct, so that's another thing that I have the flexibility. I've adjuncted at 3 universities in the Washington, D.C. area since I've been here. So I love teaching. That's important to me. So I'm able to pick up a class, for a semester, or two, and that allows me to stay connected to academia without sort of the drawbacks of academia. So, and then last, I guess advice. A lot of students, and I'm sure many of you heard this too, or you're thinking this too. I love linguistics. What am I going to do with it? The thing about being a linguist is there's not a lot of places, even like Cal, which, as I said, doesn't even include that many linguists. But as a linguist, you have a skill set that is really valuable. So I've been able to leverage my linguistic skills on several different projects here, as I've discussed. And being flexible and thinking about how you can use your knowledge and your expertise in language and what that would lend to people in other fields and in other careers, that opens up a lot of doors that you might not think about. So, okay. So let me look at some questions real quick, and then I know you want to move over to the general Q&A. So did I study AV? Yes, I did. I did study African American English. I studied style shifting in my dissertation. Are there employment opportunities at Cal outside DC? Kind of. There are a lot of professional development folks that travel a lot. So like I have a colleague who, she has a place here, but she kind of lives in Texas. So if you are doing a lot of work in a certain region, it's possible, but it's not the norm. But it is possible, especially in the professional development realm, because a lot of that team is traveling anyway, or they focus in different parts of the country. Like they might focus on the Southwest, so it might even make sense for you to have a base there. Do we work with language in the healthcare setting? I'm sure that we have had some things, especially dealing with like refugees and English learners. I'm not aware of anything that's going on now, and I haven't. But that definitely would fall, I think, within the scope of Cal's work. And let's see, are these studies in the public domain or in private subscription? I don't understand.
Yeah,
so some of these things,
if she can access these studies and read them, or
so
if
some of them, some of them are published. Some of them are on the WIDA website, which is wida.us, I think. But if you just type WIDA Consortium, some of those things are published there. And we do collaborate with places like College Board and ETS in some ways, and do have contracts with usually districts and with all kinds. And the last sentence is, yeah. So our president was he was at Arizona State University for a long time. So yes, definitely involved in. Oh, thank you. Definitely involved in language policy there. So I'll hand that over. So we have time for more questions. So I'm going to hand it back to our host Danielle for the Q&A session. And if you have any questions that haven't been asked yet, now's the time to type them into the chat box. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Hi everybody. Welcome back. I'm going to actually have to turn off my screen so that I can see your questions. Okay. But thanks so much for listening so far. To everything. Yeah. Okay. There's one last question here for Jen. Do you see it, Jen? That says you partner with any of the, did you already answer that? I'm sorry.
I just saw that. No. Do you partner with any refugee resettlement agencies in Atlanta? I don't know. Honestly, I don't work on that team or with that group, so I can't say. But I know that they have worked, with groups around the country.
Okay, for Caroline and Barbara, I think it was Barbara that has her PhD, right? The doctor title helps, but do you think it's necessary to have a PhD for your work?
Oh, Caroline, do you want to answer that first?
Sure. So I think I don't think that I need a PhD for what I do. I could do it with a master's, but I think it just helps with the credibility issue. If you aren't interested in getting a PhD, that doesn't mean that you can't do this. I think it just, depending on how crowded your marketplace is with competitors, it's something that sets you apart.
Yeah, I think I concur with a lot of what Carolyn said. I think for me personally, I needed to do a PhD. So I think I needed it for my own self-confidence. And I think, as Carolyn said about credibility, yes. I think when I was doing my PhD, I was away from academia for so long, and because I did my PhD in the UK, I learned a lot of things that I don't know that I would have learned in the U.S. just because of various emphases on research streams and theoretical backgrounds and traditions. So for me, the PhD helped a lot. Plus, it helped. Well, it gave me a good relationship with my supervisor, who was a mentor. So I think there's a lot of other stuff, not just sort of the end product of the thesis or the dissertation that goes into doing a PhD. So I guess the short answer, after I've blot on for so long, is it depends. And again, if you want to talk more about this, I'm more than happy to Skype or email or what have you. If you have any
Barbara,
questions.
if you can type your email again in the chat box, that would be helpful. Thank you, because we don't have access to your slide anymore. Okay.
Yeah, and if just from the Cal side, so I have my PhD, and many people here do, but a lot of people do not. There is sort of like a glass ceiling in a sense. Like you can only get to a certain point. But that said, it depends on what point you want to get to. So I think what Barbara was saying, it does depend. But for me and the goals that I have and things I want to do, I need my PhD to do that.
Yes. Okay. There's a question here that says, is there any particular position for non-English native speakers? I'd like to know which speaker that question is for. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. Shane Lee. I'd like to know who you are asking that question to, and then we can ask better. Now, Violet asked of the benefits of a grad degree versus those going straight into the workforce after receiving an undergrad degree. I can comment about that a little bit because I started my grad degree and then didn't finish it. I personally interpret graduate school as an investment. So if you are interested in an area, in a job that doesn't require that investment, it's something you might want to think about if you don't have the time or money, free time or money to use. So I think it's more important to think about what you want to do, what workforce you want to be in, and if that workforce requires a degree, and if you want to spend your time and money on that. So it's a really personal decision, I think. Okay.
And I would like to say I worked for 3 years before I went back to graduate school. So I did my undergrad and I worked. And I don't regret that at all. I think working, first of all, it helped me focus. When I went to graduate school, I had such a better, healthier perspective on what I wanted to get out of my education. And I also had that feeling of, okay, I don't have to be in school because I'm scared of getting a job. I've done that. It's not I think a lot of times it's really tempting to go right to graduate school because you know how to be a student. So I was able to save a little bit of money, get some work experience, and go back to graduate school with a lot more focus. So for me, again, it's personal, but for me, I'm so glad I didn't go straight to grad school.
Yeah, and for me,
yes,
this is Caroline. After undergrad, I taught with Teach for America for 2 years in Louisiana, and actually, so I worked on African American English as well, and it was specifically the way that the teachers were talking to a lot of our students about their English. The students were mostly African American. The way the teachers were talking to them about their language, I knew was not the way to do it, but I didn't know what that way was. And so that's what prompted me to the intercultural, and then kind of segue from there. So I also think it, I got more real world experience before moving up.
Okay, I'd like to go back here to Shane Lee's question for Jennifer. He wanted to know if there are employees at Cal who are not native English speakers.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people at Cal who are not native English speakers. Sometimes, in many cases, we have a lot of quantitative research assistants that are, native Chinese speakers or native Taiwanese speakers or whatever. But sometimes it is a benefit. We do a lot of we do a lot of testing, and so sometimes we want to interview students to see what they thought about items, and so it's helpful. We obviously have Spanish language speakers, but having Chinese or Arabic, sort of the major languages, that can be a real benefit at Cal. Yes.
Okay, and then Iman Al-Kahib asks, I see that some branches of linguistics are less possible to be exploited in a business, like syntax and semantics, and is that true? I would say that first of all, Danielle, I disagree with you because in translation I talk about syntax and semantics every day. And so it's in the actual field and not so much the business aspect of my job. But it's, in the marketing or in the finance part, I don't have to use linguistics. But, in my actual work, that's not just maintaining the company, I do. Do other people want to mention respond to his question, or first question? Okay. No. All right. And then,
not a syntax.
okay. Then someone asked me here, have you done any literary translations and how is it different from other projects? So I have translated a few books, but they were self-published books, not big authors or anything. And I personally didn't really enjoy it. But a lot of translators go into translation hoping to go into literary translation. So it is definitely the most competitive field of translation. There's a really nice flow chart about how the literary translation world works. I don't remember where I saw it, I'm sorry, but maybe if you search online for like literary translation flow chart, you can find it. But that is a field that also tends to require or to need a PhD more than other translation fields. So something to think about. Okay. And then someone just asked here hold on, there was another question here first from her. How did you guys start with your client bases in the beginning? Does anyone want to talk about that? How you got your first clients?
Well, sure. I mean, this is Barbara. I got my first clients through presenting at aviation industry conferences when I was doing my PhD. So I kind of had a sort of cushion or buffer of time before when I really needed to start making money. And then my first major project was with the UK Civil Aviation Authority, and that came a few months after I'd submitted my thesis, and that definitely was on the back of years of creating a relationship with them, because my boss at the CIA, he's one of the few people who's read my thesis cover to cover, so he knows exactly what my skills are and how I can contribute. And so the project that came as a result is working on a project looking at pilot air traffic controller communication and English language proficiency, and how that affects, how miscommunication happens from that, and how that affects safety.
Other speakers, you guys want to mention your answers to this question?
Yeah, this is Laurel. I'll say my industry is a little bit different in that we do most of our business development through networking. So it's knowing people, working with people, making sure that the right people know that we have these services and that they're able to see the work that we've already done. And that's how we got started as well. So we've never really done advertising. We pay attention to SEO on our website, but we don't really do Google AdWords. With naming projects, they just come up whenever they come up, so it's important that people know that you're there, and then when they have a project, they can call you. The networking part is incredibly important, and that's why I do things like blogging and speaking as well, just so that people know who we are and what we do.
And I personally would just like to say that with translation, I started out translating for other companies. I was an employee before I had my own company, and I had to find companies that were willing to give me a chance, and I got paid a lot less. And when I had my own first private clients, they were people I knew personally, and I didn't charge them, or I charged them very little. And I was very honest about my level of experience. So I said, I'm fluent and I have a linguistics degree, but I don't have a lot of experience with your area of research, for example, translate this. And after a while, I just got better, and then you have more confidence and you can demand more. Okay. There's another question here. How did you each feel secure enough to address practical financial concerns such as health insurance and steady income? Caroline, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So I was lucky. I'm married, and I was married when I started the business, and so I got my health insurance through my husband. In terms of steady income, my income still isn't steady. There are, larger months, and then there are smaller months. So you have to, I don't know if this is true for everyone else, but I have to kind of, know that that's coming, know that there'll be larger and smaller months. In New York, I don't know if this is everywhere, but in New York at least, I'm not sure I'm going to get this website right. I remember seeing this in the subway system, but I think that I think it's called freelancer.org. There are groups that are for freelancers who they offer health insurance and other things like that are harder to get when you're on your own. But I was really lucky. I had a financial cushion because of my husband's job.
Okay.
And I also, if I could point out also, this is kind of an aside, but everyone so far it seems really like the dressing, in whatever you want, pajamas or all of that. But part of why I wanted to do what I do is that I really wanted to wear suits. I really love wearing suits, and I really wanted to wear a suit every day. And I had this vision of like me in Manhattan with suits and nice purses and nice bags. And so, for what you will, if there are any of you out there that really want to wear suits, that definitely can help spur the direction that your career takes. Because I love being out with clients. I love I love talking and meeting people, and so that's just kind of the image that I wanted to portray. And that image also, I think, definitely affects the type of clients that I am able to get, and then how much I charge them.
Right, that helps too. And Sonja, I was going to say too that for me personally, with your questions about practical financial concerns, for a long time for me, my translation company was my second job. It was at night and on weekends or when I was not teaching. And so I had to save a lot of money before I decided to really take the leap and focus purely on translation. So I saved up a few months' salary so that if it didn't work out, I would have some backup. And I also by that point had learned which months had more business, and I was calculating over the years how much I made on average each month, and so I would have an idea of those kinds of things. So it's just being prepared and knowing you have a backup plan. And I always have known that I could go back into teaching if translation slows down too much for some reason. There's a really big demand here in Brazil for English classes, and I do really enjoy it as well. And then the health insurance situation abroad is different from the United States, so it's not as big of an issue for me personally. Okay. Other people want to answer that question? All right, and then we have the last one here. Go ahead, sorry.
No, well, I was just going to say in the UK we're lucky enough to have the National Health Service, so that bit was taken care of. And I financially, I was able, I think working from home saves a lot of money. I do have to struggle to wear suits, but I do wear suits depending on what conference I go to. Financially speaking, my other half has been a good financial backer as well as a good mentor, so I'm incredibly lucky to have that kind of support.
Yeah, I think it's being prepared, like making decisions knowing that you might have an unsteady income for a while. Like, for example, here in Brazil, I don't have a car. I try to keep my personal costs really low so that I can have this kind of flexibility, Okay, so Sarah McGee has a nice question here that I would like to use to segue into David's closure. So Sarah says, what's the best way to stay engaged with linguistics outside academia if you take time between undergrad and graduate study? David? Are we there? Because you guys can join the LSA and go to LSA events and conferences and things like that. That's what I'm thinking.
Actually, sorry, I didn't pick up on that. Yes, by all means. We student memberships in the LSA start as low as $40 US per year. And we have a special offer for participants in this webinar. It's 20% off. You can join online and use the coupon code Entrepreneur at checkout to get the discount. You can also, I'll give you our contact information here. The email address is lsa@lsadc.org. The phone number is 202-835-1714. And you may not know this, but about a third of our members and about a third of the attendees at the annual meeting are students. So we're always eager to get student members involved and to provide a lot of programming at the meeting and a lot of resources for students. So I'd like to first give a big thank you to all of our speakers, and thanks to all of you who attended for listening in and for your questions. We'll post a recording of the webinar on the LSA website later, and we'll let you know when we've done that and also provide some contact information for the speakers today. And again, I'd like to encourage all of you to get more involved with the Linguistics Beyond Academia Special Interest Group and to join the LSA. The website is www.linguistics-society.org. And at the very top of it, there is a link that says Join Now that will give you information about membership benefits, and there's a link that you can click to join online.
I just ask all the speakers if you'd like to put your email addresses in the chat box so that if any of the participants want to ask you a question or something, if you feel comfortable doing that. I just typed mine, but I'll type it again. Yeah, but I'm happy that those of you who enjoyed it are saying that. Thank you. Okay, guys. I just had a couple final takeaway things that I think all the speakers kind of made the same point, the same 2 points, which is that you need to combine your linguistics degree with things that are unique to your life experience. So find out what it is that you personally have to offer, you know, not only with linguistics, but with your life. Okay, how you're unique and a good person. Yeah. All right. And then the other thing was that there seems to be a certain serendipity with everyone's careers. Like everyone knew they were interested in languages, but we didn't necessarily have this company or career path planned to this level of specificity. But we eventually met people, or just things kind of fell into our laps, and we were lucky. And so I think that might happen to you. So if you're a very anxious undergraduate student, the way I was as an undergrad, you might be stressed out, and you don't have to be. Things will probably work out if you just keep yourself surrounded with other linguists and being involved in the community. Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys for coming. Any final comments, David?
No, thank you everybody for attending again. We'll get this posted on the LSA YouTube channel fairly soon, and I'll send you all out a notification when we've done that.
Okay, thanks. Bye, guys. Bye.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
day.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.